everybody. Welcome to the Open Mic Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. This podcast is here for everyone on the open mic comedy circuit, whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, or a tutor. Even comedy fans who enjoy spending lots of their time in pub basements looking for the stars of the future. Today's guest is someone who has thrown himself at the deep end from the very start. He knows a choc ice isn't just a tasty snack. He's on a roll with some competitions, and he's completed the ABC of gigs. By that, I mean Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Croydon. So please welcome to the stage, it's Mr. Paul Certi. Hello, mate. How you doing?
Amazing. Thanks for having me, Mark.
That's okay.
Honestly, I mean it. I've been looking forward to this a lot. And I just think this platform, it's one of those things similar to comedy where I know it's the beginning, it's people doing the open mic circuit, but being on the circuit and just seeing some of the guests you've had on here, I know it's a matter of time before they blow up and this blows up. So it's an honor, honestly, to be on this platform. I've been looking forward to this, so I'm excited for this conversation.
You've been on the list for a long time.
Thank you.
And we finally got down to you on the list, and it's like, yes, this is the one I've been really looking forward to, because if anybody's seen your recent Instagram post, and by recent, I mean, I think it was end of August time, about your first proper year in comedy, I guess.
Yeah.
It's been a hell of a ride.
It has.
So give us some back. So what's the initial background in terms of getting into comedy? Why and how?
Oh, okay, yeah. I think I should say probably stand up specifically. I think because for me, comedy itself, it's one of those things. Just now reflecting back on, I think it's always been a part of me, like without realizing it. Like when I was 4 or 5 years old, I remember once, this came to my mind recently. Me and my mum were on a train going somewhere once, and you know, there's the 4-seater trains and 4 seats on a train or the 2 seats, and there was a businessman sitting on one of the 4 seats with his briefcase. I should probably explain to some younger members what a briefcase is, because I know some might not. But I remember looking at him, and I was 4 or 5 years old, and I just remember saying like, "Hello, my name's John Major," and I did an impersonation of John Major. But looking back now, is that I knew at the time that would try and that would make him laugh, sort of thing. So in general, comedy's always been my escapism, if you like.
Yeah.
But specifically for stand-up, it was when I was 20, completely coincidentally, me and my cousin were just outside on the street and bumped into one of my friends, and him and his brother and sister were going to a comedy show and just said to us, "Do you want to jump in?" So we all crammed into his little car and got to the venue. And then when we got there, on the door, the guy on the door said it's £10 entry. And at the time, this was foreign to me. I couldn't fathom you pay for comedy. What are we doing here? So when I was sitting in the audience, I was arms crossed, like quite upset and just saying, this isn't that funny, and not really like immersing myself in the show. And then the headliner came on, who was Babatunde Eleshi. People might have seen on TV, from Celebrity Gogglebox and I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. But back then, he was an unknown person in the circuit. And in general, for comedy then, it was one of those things you kind of went on your laptop or went on the computer and had to search for any of these jokes, which people just share now on their phones. Yeah. He was really sort of unknown. So we knew who he was, but not well. But anyway, when he finished his set, it must have been about 20 minutes. By the time he finished, none of us were laughing. But it wasn't because he wasn't funny. It was because we were laughing so much, we were crying tears. Like all of us were just gone. I don't know if you've ever seen that when you're in the gigs where it's not laughter you can hear. It's like the audience or audience members try not to breathe because they're laughing so much. And I just observed and looked around and saw the whole room was in that same condition. And I was like, wow, that is something I would love to be involved in. But that was when I was 20. And I didn't step on stage until 14 years later.
I was going to say, so how old are you now?
Yeah, so I'm 35 now. So I was 34 when I started.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is when I was younger, what stopped me would probably be the question. What stopped me taking that leap was when I was younger, to be honest, comedy then to me was something that wasn't really cool. Or it was something that was almost like joke thing. Like, you couldn't really walk on the streets and say, I'm a comedian. It
Mhm.
was something that was almost looked down on or just dismissive. And then fast forward to get into my 30s, what kind of was still holding me back was, coincidentally, the friend who I went to the gig with, he went to school with Mo Gilligan.
Okay.
So he was 2 years younger, I think. And so naturally, I was comparing myself to this guy who's from South London, like myself. And I'm looking, and he's selling out the O2 Arena and going around on every channel, got his own show. And I sort of thought, what's the point? But then importantly, I think that's when I realized that when it comes to comedy, it's not a comparison, in that
Yeah.
we all have our own stories. We're all unique. And that's kind of where it changed for me, where I was like, things need to change. I need to just be willing to try, give things a go. Do you want me to go into what pushed me into doing it, or should we?
Yeah, go for it.
So for me, it was day to day. What you might not know is I do training courses. So I teach like first aid, fire marshal training, manual handling. So those day to day courses is what I do. And in it, it's probably where I've got quite an advantage to some people without realizing before I went into comedy. And I just genuinely used to find that people learn better when they're having fun. So I'd try and make it a fun environment. But in particular, what happened on one course was I was setting up the course, setting up the projector, my laptop. It's almost fate, if you like. I'd accidentally forgot my charger. So when I switched on the laptop, it just completely died. So I had no PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
So all I had was a flip chart board and my charm, hopefully, to try and get people through the course and hopefully not let them realize that I have nothing behind me. But on this course was one woman in particular, early 50s, I'd say. And she was one of those people who wasn't really loud, but when she spoke, she had a presence about her that everyone just gravitated to. And doing courses, normally people would say, oh, he's funny. Oh, yeah, you're a joke. Oh, yeah, you're a comedian. But she just, in the middle of the course, she just put her hand up and just started shaking her head and just said to me, you're in the wrong profession. You should be doing stand-up.
Right.
Not knowing that I'd really wanted to do it all along. And that really stuck with me because it wasn't like, oh, he's a funny guy. It was like careers advice. So that led me to thinking, yeah, I should pursue in a career in comedy or try and get into comedy. But at the same time, do you know Paul Smith?
Yes.
Paul the Joker. I was a big fan of him during lockdown. I found out all about him and his crowd work. And at the same time, I saw a video of him buying a McLaren. And all the comments were just positive. And I was just like, oh, this is completely changed. Like, it's cool. And to show you how little knowledge I had, I thought, oh, there's some money getting into this comedy. So I thought, let's jump into this. And I Googled comedy competitions in London. And the first three that come up were, back then, I don't know if it's changed, was the Blackout, King Gong, and the Ding Dong Gong Show. Yep. I think I did all three of those within a month. And as you know, my first gig was the Blackout competition because I didn't know. I just went, yeah, sure, go for that. Didn't know about open mics, didn't know about starting off in a pub or anything small. So yeah, I applied and they said it's about 5 weeks. And then that's when I did that as my first show.
I mean, that is, the naivety is probably the thing that's on your side for that in reality. Literally. If you'd done any open mics or whatever beforehand and then you thought about going to that, you might never have done it, or not for a long period of time, because you may never have felt ready. But the fact that you've gone, I don't know, to me, this is just getting up, telling some jokes. What even is a gong? Oh, yeah, that's what a gong is.
What saved me, I think, was two things. I think that definitely above all was the naivety. I had no experience, no idea what I was going into. So therefore, where I didn't know where to expect, that was probably what really helped me. Had I known what I was going into, in general, I wouldn't. There is a little part of me that still feels, I still like tell people you should do this as your first gig, just because I know that it will show how many people kind of think they want to do comedy if you really want to do comedy, if that makes sense. I mean, if that makes sense in that sense, because that's what helped me, was just not knowing what I'm getting into. But on that, what really helped me was going back to being a fan of comedy, or when I was sitting in the audience as a paying customer, one thing that I knew is you can't just say, oh, I'm funny, I'll be all right. You have to prepare for this. Yeah. And in general, I'll be honest, I'm someone who normally wings it through life. I used to love things like presentations at schools because I'd just get up and blag my way through anything. But I knew with this, you had to be prepared. Where it was 5 weeks in advance, you have to prepare for this. And my I wouldn't even say tip, but what works for me is don't write. I don't know if you know this or not, but I don't actually write, as in write jokes. I rehearse ridiculously, but I don't write anything down. Purely because I compare it to when I used to go for job interviews. If I'd write down sentences, I'd be on the bus or the train there, and on the way there, my mind would just go blank, and I couldn't even process one or two words. And I think I get it now doing open mic comedy, but going in, whenever I was at an actual comedy show where I've paid money for, if someone pulled out notes on stage or was flustered or didn't know, it kind of, the audience just turned on you. So I went to the Blackout once before I performed to watch. And that was when I applied, actually, about 6 weeks before. And I was one of the people going, boo, get him off, give him a card. Like, I feel so rubbish for being that person because I had no expectation. But yeah, that's what helped is for 5 weeks, what I did was I set a countdown timer for 5 minutes. I had no material at all. And I was going through the first 3 days. I was like, hi, I'm Paul. Hello, my name's Paul. And I just wasn't sure how to introduce myself. It took me about 3 days just to get that down. And then what helps me is somewhat trying to be a bit of a perfectionist in that if I stumbled on a word, once I did start to get material, I would just start that timer again. So I'd be in my room for about 3 or 4 hours, just resetting the timer. Even if I got down to like the last 10 seconds, if I messed up that word, just go back again. And I think that just helped me not to have the notes on stage or not to come in with not using notes or knowing what notes were. That has definitely been a consequence at times when I've been on stage. Like the first time I did King Kong, which was my 4th gig.
We should clarify that.
Yes,
when on your first gig, when you did the Blackout, you passed it.
Yes,
you got the whole 5 minutes out, and
with that, that will also open a whole can of worms into that experience in itself. So as I say, so the Blackout itself, if people don't know, I know most people do, but it's up the creek, up to about 250 people in there. And this night it was packed. It was about 250 people. And it's the only time I'd ever wrote anything down. And that was on the way to up the creek. I think just the nerves of getting there. I wrote my set word for word on my phone in the email, like, hi, I'm Paul, everything word for word, just to get it all out. I don't know if you know this. So on the night when I got there, firstly, I was 8th from the list and someone didn't turn up, so they crossed them out. So I became 7th. And I remember saying, oh, lucky number 7. Now, I'm not superstitious at all. I'm not. But it just showed me the nerves in that situation, what you start grabbing onto or trying to grasp to get through. But why my first show in particular is unlike many other people's first shows, not just that it's the Blackout, is I was 7th. Before me was this guy who was 6th called Carl. Carl was a really nice guy. We were talking. He goes on stage and does his thing. And it was Carl Porter.
Yeah.
You know, the slow motion guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. That clip of him that went viral all around the world. Yeah. That was 6th on stage. And then I literally went straight after that.
That's
and it
mad.
it was unlike anything other. So I think part of it was where he just done something there. Sometimes, I don't know if you had this on a gig where if someone's really, really good or it's something exceptional, you've just got to try and grab onto the coattails and go with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that, in particular then, it was so crazy because I'd planned in my head, okay, one of two things. It's going to go well. You might bomb. The person before you might be good or they might be terrible. Just be prepared. Nothing prepared me for the person before you might have one of the biggest comedy viral videos of all time. And coming in, I looked at it like a competition. I was really competitive. Oh, please, I hope they are bad. I hope no one's good. And so what happened is the same friend again who I'd been going to the comedy show with, he said to me earlier that day, I won't be able to make it, Paul. And I was quite relieved. No one's going to be there. Then as the show started, 5 of my closest friends came in. But growing up in South London, they're not there to be like, you can do this and cheering as some people do. They're there to laugh at the fact that it's probably going to be terrible for me. And so when Carl was on stage doing the whole slow motion thing, you've seen the videos, it's incredible. in person, it's just 10 times more amazing.
Yeah, I bet.
He came off stage, and I've honestly not seen this before at the Blackout. People actually started standing up and giving him a standing ovation for it. And the host was Ed Keir. I don't know if you know Ed Keir.
Yeah, he did my first Blackout.
Right, yeah. So he came out, and Carl's just done this, and my mind is going, what on earth is going, like, this is not normal. This is not normal. And he comes on stage and he goes, wow, that was incredible. Next up, Paul Certi. And just and that's my introduction to comedy. As I was walking to the stage, I remember my brain was saying, you idiot. I knew you shouldn't have done this. What is wrong with you? Run away now. Like, that was just coming into the whole time. And my mind just went blank. I couldn't remember my set. But then it was so weird. As soon as I picked up the microphone and I was like, how are we doing? We good? It all just came back to me. And that's kind of what saved me there.
In that 5 or 6 weeks, you're creating material. You've got no comedy experience now. How do you go about? I guess again, it's the naivety, is that you probably don't really know how to formulate jokes at this point properly.
Not at all. But what did help me is I'm also a big fan of film in general. And I wish I could remember what it was, but I've always liked film and film writers. I think one of the things I saw was an interview with George Lucas, and they were talking about Star Wars. And he was like, people go on about Star Wars being this whole intergalactic thing. And then he was like, it's just a soap opera set in space. I was like, wow, I never noticed that. That's his words. And so I was really fascinated by writing in general. And what it was is I saw somewhere someone said about film writing, but it applies to comedy. A lot of people are afraid to write themselves into a corner, but he said that's where the magic is how do I get out of this, or how do I link stuff together? For me, coming in, all of it was pretty much, who am I? Okay, I'm a mixed race person. It all pretty much formulates around that. So then I just tried to link from writing one joke, how can I connect that to something else? How does that go into something else? So the basic stuff of when I started was about race, about the differences about race, there was a misdirection there. It was about, I think white guys are really good at, or the best in the world at, being homeless, and then linking that to a homeless story on the train and just taking it there. But I think for me, comedy or stand-up comedy is very similar to magic in that it's all about, if you can do it on my style, misdirection. Can you build people to go another way and go back? So I think the sense of not knowing, it was just more so being an audience member and just trying to write a joke and not worrying about where is the connection. Find that after. If there's two funny jokes here or two jokes I think are funny, the difference in race and then how homeless guys are on a train, how can I connect those? Worry about it afterwards and figure it out.
I think you probably do yours in a similar way to me, is that I have sections. So I have a section on this and a section on that. And I've got probably 8 good sections that are probably 3-ish minutes each. And I can literally go to the shelf and go, I'll have that one tonight and that one tonight and that one tonight. And all it requires is a few words or a sentence that will connect those dots together. It doesn't have to be smooth. It doesn't have to be perfect. But so long as there is an intricate link, if you finish one bit talking about how your family push you to do something, and the next bit is, oh, I'm going to talk about how I've been married for so long. That's a natural link. But in another way, you might just go down a completely different route by picking another thing off the shelf. For me personally, I think that's a really good way to write, because as you go through the circuit and you start with your 5 minutes, everybody, I know it's from speaking to everybody I've spoken to, is that everyone gets bored after probably 20 or 25 gigs of doing the same stuff. And you want to do something different. But if you actually go forward a year and look back to where you was, you'll know that original 5 minutes still could be improved. It's never finished. You can improve it rather than moving on to something else. And having these sections as you progress through the open mic circuit, you'll go from 5 minutes. Okay, I now need to do a 7. Okay, I'll pull that next section off the shelf and I'll add that one in. And then you go for a 10. So I've got those 2 extra to bolt on. And you've got your 10. People say, I don't have a 10. You do have a 10. It's just in pieces. You just need to connect the dots.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point as well. I agree, Mark. I think for me, it was as soon as, it was weird, we really wanted to go well. And as soon as I got like the 5 down, it was like, I'm bored of this. And so that's why for me, it was more than that. But I'd said to myself, and I encourage people, I don't know anyone's timetables or schedules. If you can, if that's the case, you get at least twice a week where one, you're perfecting that five, if you like. And the second one, I'll just try complete whatever comes to mind, or whatever I can. Even sometimes now it would literally just be crowd work, but it is that thing. If you just do the same thing, it does become monotonous. But the way for me is for example, my first five, or not even that, just my first five, but parts of that now, sections of that can become a whole set, or I can, as you say, I can pull back different stuff. But I think the two things for me is what helped is I just started trying to perfect the five on one night. And then the second time or second gig I go to, I won't touch that at all. And I might run out of material after 2 minutes, or I might not have anything, or you might stutter over lines, but just start trying to go into different things, or try and be topical.
Yeah. I always think it's if you could throw, or even if you've got your five and you can throw an extra line in, just one line, and see what happens with that, and you'll get a rough idea whether that's something that you can then play on and generate for another section. Like you say, with topical stuff as well, you always have to be that little bit wary that as topical as it was to talk about like a Tory government.
Yes.
Now it's irrelevant. But if you can take the same story and change the color from blue to red, it still works. It doesn't matter who the MP you're talking about is. It's the persona you're giving off, that it's somebody that's supposed to be good at something and lead people, but is actually crap. And then you just pick another MP, whoever's in the news and doing it crap.
Yeah, I completely agree. There was a whole time, and some people built up a whole part on like Rishi Sunak or whatever, and the Tory government, like you're saying. But then when you hear that now, it's like it's bit past it. Just change it up. Yeah, don't be afraid.
Just move it to Reform and Nigel Farage, and it'll get a laugh. There's always a clown to play off somewhere, especially in politics. But before I kind of pulled you back from it, you said your fourth gig was King Gong.
Oh yeah, ridiculous thing that happened. So as I say, I applied for King Gong, did that in August. My friend had a store at the Notting Hill Carnival, so I helped out there, and then I ran to King Gong and changed. But that day I'd left these jeans in the dryer for too long, and they were I could barely get them on. And so I went on with these really tight jeans. I've gone on stage, and they were laughing at the outfit. But I started, and it was going okay. And then I just got so flustered by that gig. It's really a weird thing with King Gong, because again, for people who don't know, I think it's 450 it fits in there.
Yeah.
But it's tiered, and it genuinely feels like a gladiator sport, or like you're a jester, like thrown into one of those arenas where it's just a place of hate. But it's weird as well, because the show starts at 8. If you're there at 7:30, it's half full sometimes, and then you put your head down, look up, and the place is packed. And once the show starts, nothing prepares you for it like being on it. And so I'm someone in general who can normally pick up I'd like to think somewhat sensitive hearing, so I can hear if someone's got a comment and I can go to it. As soon as I could hear card, I was just completely thrown off, and I was stumbling. And it was a weird thing, actually. They were actually supportive at first, like, you can do this.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, so they were like, get out of here. And I remember I ran upstairs and ran out. And because it was August and it was still daylight outside, so it was like, it was a horrible experience. And that one, I didn't know that you can't apply for another 6 months once you've done it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can do the try and jump on in the crowd sort of thing, and I did it like 3 or 4 times. It's never gone well for me there, to be honest with you. It hasn't. But what changes now, I think, was the first time I went on there. I went to support Tevin, actually, and he did the last one. And I wasn't on the list. And then they said, oh, yeah, there is a space, like, throw you on in the second part. But I just, dare I say, I genuinely didn't care in terms of the night itself. And I tried like I tried a risk, and that's one thing that I'd say to people, especially new comics, or even some comics who may not have done the Blackout that much. I did it as my first one. The Blackout I've probably done about 13 times since then, but purely because I live in South London. It's near to me, and myself and a comedian who started the same or did that as one of their first few gigs. I don't know if you know Dimitar Vasilev, Bulgarian guy who's really, really good friend of mine. We started kind of at the same time. But anyway, we would go every Thursday. And if we didn't get on, we'd just go in the crowd. And what I'd do is just immerse myself in it, but also start to try and pick up, in general, what the audiences find funny, or what do they not like, and try and pick that sort of stuff up. And then it very quickly became a thing where I'd be going so often. as I say, about 13 times. You'll hear the host say when you're upstairs in the green room, the winner gets a bottle of Prosecco. That is it. That is
Yeah.
genuinely it as far as they're concerned. It isn't necessarily you in here and then tour the world. So
No.
I see a lot of comedians when they don't do well, they get disheartened. For me, I just started to use it as, hang on a minute, here's a place where I get 2 minutes to talk in front of 200 people.
Yeah.
And in general, if you can do, you could gig 7 days a week in front of a crowd of 30. Nothing really prepares you for that environment of a gig of 200 paying customers. So even if it's 2 minutes, I'm going to get 2 minutes on stage. And I've had it where as soon as the lights have gone out, I'm gone. But it's more for that experience of doing bigger rooms. I every now and then try and go back to it just so I can stay used to doing a big room, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's quite interesting actually, going back so much. 'Cause I did always wonder what the prize was for. I know they say the bottle of Prosecco, but I always wondered, like, I think with King Gong, if you win it, you get invited back at some point in the future to do a middle spot, don't you, on one of their weekends?
Yeah.
And obviously they've got so many people wanting to do it. The list, you know, I don't think you get on for like 3 to 6 months, if that.
6 months, I think it is. I think I know Bert Broadbent. He won it. I think, or did he win it, or did he get to fight? I think he won it. And another guy, Jordan Gill. They just got on now, and I think he won it December last year. So yeah, 6-7 months. And the Blackout in general, not really. And what they said, just from going so often, we speak to the management there, and they were saying it's like people might have an amazing 5, but then we want to see you come again and do something different. Like they're looking for the longevity of stuff, and it's just one of those things that, as I say, why I say it is because doing the open mic circuit, more the pubs and stuff like that, I see some amazing comics. They go on the Blackout, it doesn't go out well, and then people get really disheartened. And I know how it felt the first time I'd gone there, and I felt, oh gosh, am I in the right thing? Do people really like me? I can tell you this as well. I've gone to the Blackout. I've seen people get gonged off 1 week within 2 minutes or just after the 2 minutes, and then literally win it the next week or so. So you never know. So that's why I wouldn't in general. I try and tell people, do not take it seriously in terms of the competition. It's just a part of the journey.
Yeah, I think Christian Allman went through that recently.
Yeah,
in that he went out really quite quickly when he revealed that his girlfriend was Pakistani, and they got rid of him. And then the next picture I see of Christian is I just won the Blackout 2 weeks later. He's just like, way to go, super.
Yeah, I was there that night. That was last week. Was it last? Yeah, last week that was. Yeah, I went that night actually. I jumped on, and it was one of those where it just all aligned. You never know. That's why I just say just keep going, because that's one of the things that I started to see when I started Googling comedians and starting to look for advice when I got into it. A lot of the great comedians I'd see, especially over in America, they would be like, you need to bomb as soon as you can, and the quicker you bomb, the better. And back then I thought, what on earth are they talking about? No chance. Especially after my first gig went well. Then you'll be pleased to know, or people should be pleased to know, the reality check hit me afterwards. And it's inevitable. I've seen the best comedians bomb, and it is a part of that. And I think that's where you know how much you really want it, because it was surreal. It was, my first one was a Blackout. My next one was, I don't know if you ever did you do American Style?
No, I've never done that one.
Did you ever? It stopped going, unfortunately, I say, because American Style was a night in Shoreditch in the Lighthouse Bar. You'd go and there's about 30 comedians. Now,
oh God.
But when I say open mic, some people have literally got on their book like, knock, knock, who's there? That's what they've written, and that's it. But they're like, you've got 5 minutes, take all the time. So it can get quite painful. But what happened the first time I went there is they normally prioritize new comedians out of 30. And as I say, when I'm not performing, I'm actually immersed in it. I'm in the crowd. I try and be supportive. And so I sat at the front. People are trying out their crowd work on me. And I'm cheering, and I'm hearing the cheers get quieter and quieter. But because I'm trying to be respectful, I'm paying attention to whoever's on stage. And I think out of 30, I was 28th. And when I finally went up on stage, I'm normally high energy, so I was like, how are we doing? We good? And I turned around and there was 2 people in front of me. One guy who was just packing up his bag from the prop comedy he'd done earlier. Another guy who was just hanging around, and the bar staff who was she was just standing there watching, and that was horrific. And then I've had gigs where I always say the one thing I don't mind with gong shows is this. I don't like it, but I would rather be booed than silence. I can't. Oh, that we're giving you nothing.
Yeah.
That
But
hurts me more than when people are like, "Get off, boo." I would rather be booed than have silence.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's two. I've learned there's two types of silences in comedy. There's the silence where people you can tell people are actually they're bought into it and they're listening to your story. You might not have heavy gags and stuff, but they're like, "What's the next bit? What's the next bit?" And
Yeah.
then you've got the silence of the people that their eyes are just saying, "I'm not interested." That is just so hard to deal, especially if you're on a stage where you can't see the whole audience. I
Mm,
mean, sometimes you can see like most places you can see the front, I don't know, 2 or 3 rows. You get a
yeah.
good picture of what's going on. But
Yeah.
if you get to one of those where you can barely see the front row. I was actually saying this to somebody this morning is that I found that I did a gig where there was one person in the front row and everybody behind I couldn't see. So you know when you're doing a gig and you have an audience that aren't laugh out louders, but they're
Oh.
shoulder shufflers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you know you're doing something right still because you can
Yeah.
see people enjoying it. If
Mhm.
you can't see them,
Yeah.
you're immediately your brain's going, no, this is I've died. I've absolutely died.
That's what really helped me. For example, the first time I went to Liverpool, it's weird how things work. Is because I think there was between 100 to 200 people, and I
Yeah,
went on stage and started talking, and it was deadly silent. And so in my head, I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, like what's going on here?"
yeah,
Um, but I just realised is particularly, for example, and this is me generically speaking, in London, a lot of the comedy is open mic. For these open mic nights, it's at the back of a pub, and people they're not really there. It's just there happens to be comedy on while they're getting a drink in some of these
hmm,
venues. Or whereas when I did the hot water one, for example, in Liverpool, people have left their house specifically for comedy.
yep,
So they sat down, they're invested, and that's why they're quiet, as you say, is when they're into the story, or sometimes you're telling your joke, and they will just be dead silence because they're invested in what you're saying. But that's what I found. The one I mentioned, for example, um, at the American style one is that silence, or which was really tough, or where there's not many people. That actually
yeah,
started to help me for how many times I've done gigs where it is silence, or people just don't find you funny.
yeah.
That it helps me to be more calm in the silence. I think.
So you've gigged in Liverpool, Amsterdam, Barcelona,
Mhm.
all around the UK, I
Yeah,
presume. How have you found gigging in other countries and other cities outside of London in comparison to
yeah.
London?
I think firstly for me it was for London itself is it's not everywhere, but there are for me part of the reason I got into this as well is uh, in a sense I felt before I got into it I felt comedy's dead in that when I grew up comedy was everywhere. Daytime
Mm,
TV, you'd have comedians who are now presenters. The game shows were hosted by comedians. You'd have comedy on TV. Even if like weekends and stuff, it'd be like Mr. Bean would be on Friday or
yep,
Saturday, and it would be there'd be comedy throughout the day, and there'd be specials on TV. Um, and I think for me, one of the things that has especially in London is people can be a bit sensitive, which is um, it's just the times we live in, which is fair
yeah,
enough. But for me, I I think as well with London, sometimes because it's a hub for tourism, you could
hmm,
do a gig, for example, in central London and say I went to Tesco, for example, and the crowd might be tourists and not know too much
yep,
about Tesco or a meal deal. And so for me, it was part of it was going out of London. I can get a British crowd, and particularly up north. I just knew in general they don't take themselves as seriously, if you like. They're
hmm,
more open, and part of it was actually linked to um, the performance I did with Carl Porter, because after that gig, obviously the night of the gig, he won the Blackout that night with the slow motion thing. We
yep,
were in the bar across the road, and he was with my friends. We were talking, um, and having a drink and everything. And then it got to about 11, half 11. He's like, I've got to shoot off. I'm going back to Manchester. So he'd literally come down to do um, the Blackout and gone back to Manchester. Um, and then I spoke to him. He put it out, I think, we got the video on the Tuesday, I think it was. And he put the video out the next day. And it
yeah,
millions of views it got. And then I was saying, oh my gosh, mate, I can't believe all this stuff that's happened. And he was just like, I've quit my job. Like but he told me, but importantly, he told me he's been doing that for 3 years. He's been gigging for 3 years. And that's what I think that people don't realize outside of comedy. Like, you might think, oh, it's an overnight success. The guy I mentioned earlier, Babatunde, he's been going about 16 years. And he's just made it this year on TV. And even Paul Smith, when I went up to Liverpool, what really actually helped me was I looked at this guy and still look at this guy like, how on earth do you get to that level? Of his crowd work for me is just on another level. But when I went up there, what really almost put me at ease is I was speaking to one of the owners, the guy Binti, and he said, oh yeah, basically what happened, we had this venue. We told him just MC every night. And for about 12 years, he was MCing every single night. So naturally, you're going to get better at crowd work. And that's why it looks so effortless now. But it's all about the work that's been put in. But for me, back to what you were saying, I think having seen Carl do the opposite of coming, willing to travel the distance for that one chance, for that gig, was important. And for me, just sometimes where I just found like, I wouldn't say crowds are necessarily stuck up, but in some rooms, some things are off limits. And I never go out to be offensive. I wouldn't even consider myself a dark comedian, but starting out, I almost had to label myself as that, just to say anything on any slightly controversial topic. Where up north, for example, I found in general, people, they just don't care what you say. You can have a go at them as long as you have a go at yourself as well. They will just take it on the chin.
Yeah, I think the worst ones are the ones that get offended on behalf of other people.
That's what
If I do a joke, I do certain jokes about Jewish and Jewish backgrounds, and they go into an inevitable area, and then you see some people there. Some people are like loving it, and some people are like, ugh. I'm like, this is my lived experience.
Yeah.
I'm the one making the joke about it. Don't feel bad for me. This is my experience. And you want to say that in a set, but you know it's going to derail things when you say that.
No, yeah.
It's that whole just go with it. Just go with it and try and enjoy it. And yeah, I don't know. I've gigged outside of London in Hertfordshire and stuff like that, and because there's within London there is so much comedy, but outside of London there's such few comedy. More people are up for anything, because this is their night out. This isn't somebody who's just walked past a pub and gone, oh, I'll go in here for a drink. Oh, there's some comedy, I'll go and watch that. These people have, whether they're paid or not, they've gone, okay, I've booked a ticket, whether it's a free ticket or not, to a venue. I'm going to go to it and I'm just going to enjoy it, see what happens. So one other thing that you've done this year was So You Think You're Funny. How did you find that whole experience?
Honestly,
you got to the semi-finals, didn't you? In Edinburgh?
Honestly, it turned out to be one of the best experiences for me, and I think because firstly it was at the Backyard Comedy Club, which I'd always wanted to do, and it can be quite hard as an open micer to get on it, to get in there or to get on. And I know now, having done it and gigged there a couple of times, it's the guy who runs it, David. He's got thousands of people, so you can't take it personal when you don't get on. But that night in particular, what happened is I ended up going 11. I was last. I was 11th, and that night was stacked. Like, sometimes you go to competitions and you're like, this is ridiculous or this is not fair. So on that night was 4 people from our heat, I think, got through to the next round. And that was Jonathan Rippon. I don't know if you know JR. A guy called Rex. And I think 10th was, do you know Maxim K? Russian guy.
No.
He's a young Russian guy. He does a...
Possibly.
Yeah, I'm trying.
A lot of these names.
If you know, with comedians, if you hear the joke, you probably know who it is. But for me, it was because, again, my friends came to that one, and Jonathan Rippon went on, and they were like, you're in trouble. Like he's definitely going through. The guy Rex I've known, he's gone through. And then I think Maxim was 10th. It was one of those where I was like, oh my gosh. Some of these comedians, and this is one thing that I've learned to watch out for, is sometimes you go into rooms and even the Blackout and people are like, hey, how's everyone doing? Yeah, I've been gigging here, there, whatever. There's always, whenever it's like the Blackout or something, there's one comedian who's just quiet in the corner. And sometimes I'm like, now, that person might be an animal. And so anyway, when he came off, I really felt the pressure of, oh my gosh, this has been a ridiculously good night. Like, good luck following that. But I found over time, when I perform with really good comedians, people who make you really nervous going on stage, it always kind of drives me and motivates me. And because I can be high energy, I managed to meet it on that night and go through. And there's times you don't, but that particular night was one of my favorite gigs because it was, the bars here, and like Maxim come off, the whole night was pretty much done, and it was again, hold on to the coattails and stay at with this level, if you like, and got through. And then going up to Edinburgh, I'd never done the Fringe, I'd never experienced it before. I heard all about it, and I was only there for 2 days, but fascinating to see where it literally does take over the whole city. That you look on all the street posts, it's everywhere, you see all this stuff. To be honest, Maxim will tell you, the winner, I don't know if it was a girl called Alana, a Scottish lady, she was in my heat. I called it after that. I said, I think she's going to win it here, because it was two things, not to take away from her, but it was when they're on stage, you're kind of behind the curtains, just waiting as each act goes on. So you're by the side of the stage, but whoever's next, you're behind. I was third, and thought, I've not done too bad here. But when she came on, she's got a whole joke about being Scottish and Scottish funerals. And again, I don't want to give too much away for her joke, but how it almost becomes a party, basically. It was just the marriage of brilliant joke, amazing joke writing, and being in Scotland and being hilarious. It was just, I was just like to people, she's going to win it here. I think she's, and she did go on to win it. So yeah, but it was a good experience, and I learned from it because people told me before, there's people from all around the world that come there and all these things, but it was still just a normal. It was in the sense of it was a British crowd still, which I didn't pick up on. But the one thing with that is, I don't know if you know, as they say, whichever round you go through, you tell the same jokes. Yes. And so that is where part of it was, I was done with that set the first time I'd done it. I'd been rinsing it out to the point, honestly, because as I say, I would normally try a set and then do new stuff. I couldn't remember the 7 or 8 minutes that we'd done. I was struggling to remember it, which is probably not good for the competition, but for myself, that's kind of where I want to be. And that's why I say it's the importance of both, to refine your set and make it as tight as you can. Also to gig outside of that, because as you mentioned there, my 7 or 8 minutes I did at So You Think You're Funny was just an original 5, but because of time, as you say, I kind of paced it out, and at over 7-8 minutes you can really stretch things and lean into things, and that's what it ended up being for me.
It's a one-time only enter competition as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, but and my advice to anyone doing stand-up now is, it's not don't go in not to win a competition or anything like that, but it really isn't the be-all and end-all of it. I wish the best to everyone who, I'm sure she's going to be a star. If you see it, you can see, you kind of get the feeling like that's someone who's going to go really far. Sometimes you see it. And I think, again, I think she's been doing comedy 6 or 7 months, something disgusting like that. But you... It's weird in both. I feel it's both ways. Some people, and to take it away from her, this who frustratingly for me are really good and really young as well. That just really eats at you. But then it's like, over time, what you see sometimes with some of the comedians who may have been on TV who are young and have success, they end up needing to have a break because they haven't had those life experiences, and that's where it can come full circle, I think.
Yeah,
where you had was it a few? It might have been a couple of months ago. You had Mark on here.
Mark Rivlin.
Yeah, Mark Rivlin, slightly older guy, and his story of his first time going on stage, where he bombed, and it was however many years later. As he was telling that to you, he started sharing that story in one of these open mic nights, and we were getting goosebumps by what he was saying. And it just shows you, I think that's again why I say it's always about you. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't worry if you don't do well in a competition. it's the longevity that gets you through this game that I've realised.
So I sarcastically, when everybody puts out gig posters every month for where they're doing their stuff. Back end of last year, I think the tagline on pretty much all of my gig posters was something along the lines of "the only comedian not to have won the Comedy Virgin's plastic trophy."
Well, I'll give you a run for your money with that one there. But it's yeah. I did. Do you know what? That's funny you say that, because I did start to feel like that actually with Comedy Virgins in particular. Yeah. But then one night I went there, and it was, for me, it was one of those, I gave a really polished performance. But on the night, a guy came on the stage. It was his first time on stage. And you know this because he had 10 friends with him. So his first time on stage, and they do it by the cheer. So I really felt I made the crowd work, but he won the trophy. And that's when that's what made me look, still at envy at these people showing off with their little gold trophies. But
I know.
Yeah, knowing it really doesn't matter in the long terms of things. And I really get excitement sometimes, particularly with that, where I might have been on a show, you perform, or you have people perform, or even if I'm watching and someone does really well and the headliner has to come after them, and you're like, sometimes you're like, oh, good luck following that. But that's where you see sometimes with experienced comedians where I've seen this on a few occasions where someone does really well and they've just destroyed the room, and you're thinking, I would hate to follow that. But I'm looking at the headline or whoever it is, and their heads moving, they're piecing things together and go on and then show kind of where that experience comes from.
Definitely.
And so that's one of the things that I'm just a big fan of, consistency and longevity. I think that's what the secret is. And as I say, my big thing is always get comfortable getting uncomfortable.
Yes. 100%. One of the questions I've started to like asking recently is like, do you remember the first ever joke you ever told as an adult or a child?
As a child, would have been that John Major one, probably about 4 or 5 years of age. And that was just an impersonation, really. As an adult was, I think that the first one I didn't write but come up with was me growing up in South London, and the difference of being mixed with black, being in the playground and the black kids saying, come over here, you're one of us. And the white kids used to say, you fucking heard them, go and fuck off. Like, it was just, it's one of those where in some rooms in London, offended on your behalf, as you say, is people like, I can't. And you're just like, oh gosh. But you go to, like, I did Southend recently. Do you know, I don't know if you know Terry Gargan. He's got a gig in Southend, Dirty Dog Comedy. And that is such a throwback to me to old British kind of crowd where
Jim Davidson and all that.
Yeah. One of the guys there who's a good comedian. I had him on one of my shows, was Pat Smith, and he literally opened up with Jim Davidson. Like, it's that kind of like. But I think as well that's missing and that's needed is that, and that's a good crowd. If I get a rowdy British crowd, that's up there with the best of them. So yeah. But yeah, that one there was one of the first that I wrote. And as I say, it was, for me, the misdirection is almost like a magician. That's what I kind of lean into.
So what is your favourite joke? It doesn't have to be your best. This isn't the question. It doesn't have to be the best joke. Mm-hmm. I think all of us have a favourite joke, but it might not be the one that hits all the time. And how did it come about, and how has it changed?
I'd say two. I'd say it's almost... My favourite I'll go to is, there's one I do about my sisters, where I say how I grew up with my sisters, and I've got 5 sisters, and like the other day I was driving and I crashed into this guy, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, first of all, don't shout at me, like, and I just go into it. Mainly the reason why I enjoy doing that joke, because it's sometimes being on stage and in the crowd, a guy making jokes about women, that's a touchy subject. But whenever I get that joke off, you almost see the relief in the audience, where there might be a lady with her arms crossed that I've mentioned having sisters, or where's he going to go with this? But as soon as I do that joke, I tend to find that the women relax, or they'll come up to me afterwards and say, I can tell you've got sisters. They know I'm not just like taking a mick there in that sense. That's probably my favourite in sense, or my safe joke, if you like, that I just know that's normally going to get me out of trouble. I think with it, sometimes I've told it where, don't know why, I dig a hole for myself where, I enjoy sometimes digging a hole where it's like, you're going to make the room uncomfortable and then try and get out of it. It's almost like a fun thing to do. I think as well, the one I mentioned earlier in the playground, sometimes I've done that in a room where I know 99% of the room is going to be offended on my behalf. And it's just one of those things where, I don't know if you've had it, Mark, where you're just like, I know this is not going to get the reaction, or I know people are going to be uncomfortable, but you read the room, but you still just like, have this.
Yeah.
And,
I'm at the moment, I've got a joke that I'm not saying I'm flogging a dead horse, but whenever I tell the joke to comedians, they love it. But when I do it in front of an audience, I don't know if I just haven't quite got the wording right or anything at the moment.
one of the things that I noticed as well is some of the jokes I would do, because all of the first stuff I had, my first 5 minutes, was my story, which just happened to all be about race. And what happened, I started putting them videos on Facebook, and some of them weren't getting liked, but they were getting shared a couple of times, which showed me that people are showing it to their friends in secret. So it's one of those things where publicly they don't want people to know, but privately they will laugh at.
Yeah.
And in terms of with rooms, one of the things that I'll say to people from just doing the bigger rooms more often, in terms of just going up to the Blackout more often, if you do a smaller room where there's 10 or 12 people, sometimes you'll do a joke and one person might chuckle, or they might laugh with their friend or hide their laughter.
Yeah.
But if you do some of those jokes you have like that, where, oh no, only one person out of the 12 are laughing, you do that in an environment where there's 200 people.
Yes.
The whole place is laughing because they don't feel as alienated, or they don't feel, oh, I shouldn't laugh at that.
Yeah.
And one of my top tips for people, if you can, whenever I'm in a pub or something like that, I'll do a joke, and sometimes I'll look at the bar staff to see their reaction, purely because they see comedians all the time, so they hear all sorts of jokes, and sometimes they're like, or they might have a little chuckle. And if there's 3 or 4 comedy nights there a week, or that got comedy going on often, then you know, sometimes, I wouldn't hold it as gospel, but sometimes you know that there's something there. If people smirk, or they're embarrassed to laugh, that is sometimes, it's not, it doesn't mean it's a bad joke if it's in a smaller room, because they just don't want to admit to that publicly.
Yes, exactly that. And it takes 1 or 2 people to relax and burst, to then it almost gives permission to the other people in the room. You're allowed to laugh at this.
Yeah.
If this person, generally, especially within London, there's very few people out there that are just trying to be offensive for the sake of being offensive.
Yeah.
If somebody's come up with a joke, they think it's funny, but not trying to be offensive and trying to. They're not Ricky Gervais. They're not one of these big stars that can get away with whatever they want to get away with. You just have to find that right line and stay on the right side of the line, because the one thing is that I've had a couple of friends that have started and they're on the darker side. You say, I would potentially park some of those things for the moment, just because you want gigs in the future.
Yeah.
And if you just come out and be totally offensive for the sake of being offensive, these open mic bookers are not going to be booking you, and you're not going to be getting stage time, and you're not going to be able to progress. So you need to kind of take the audience with you, like by the hand, and for them to trust you, and then you can move into your darker stuff.
Yeah, I think as well, one of the things to tie it back to earlier is, as I mentioned, I compare it somewhat to like when I'd go for job interviews, in that people judge you in the first few seconds of meeting you. I think that is very true. That's why I try and start with, even if I'm not always shouting, but try and appear confident, even if you're trembling inside or you're really nervous, to get people on board. And I think that's one thing I noticed. It's weird, the timing, particularly with what you said as well, is when I started was when Ricky Gervais was having a lot of success and Dave Chappelle was having a lot of success with controversy. So some people who started when I started, their whole thing, as you said, was, let me just be as controversial as possible. But as you say, when people come up and it's just controversy, sometimes it's like people might mention race or gender or religion, and the way it's done, sometimes it's like, oh, that's actually believable. Do you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't feel like a comedy for some people, or the audience might have that perception. There was a guy the other day, I'll be honest, he said this joke about, the other day I slept with a miner, and then his thing is supposed to be a coal miner was the back end of it, because he was an older gentleman. And the way he said it, as soon as he said that sentence of I slept with a miner, 2 people just got up and walked out. And then when he come off stage, he was like, what, people can't tell a joke? Can't you tell I was joking? And the audience in their face was like, And when he walked off, it's probably one of the only times I've seen where the MC was like, give it up for such and such. Not a single person clapped or anything. It was just complete silence. It was painful. And then I went after him, actually. So I tried to make a joke of it, like, you shouldn't judge people by their how you see them. Like, I came in here and I thought you were a paedophile, and and then it was just to try and get it back. But it was, and that's one of the things that I'll be honest with you, I struggled, because I grew up a lot watching kind of Black American comedy. And
Yeah.
over there, it's like you're a minority, and it's you can get away with saying a lot of stuff. Whereas here, with what's changed with time, which is probably progression, has actually worked against me, because people go on stage and they're like, "You're a man in his 30s. You're in a position of privilege here in London. Like you can't punch down, or you can't."
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just wow, it's changed. I'm not used to this, but yeah.
I always find it quite difficult. I don't know how you find it in terms of standing out. You want to be noticed, but I don't want to be famous, if that makes sense. I don't know. You want somebody to walk away from a gig and go, yes, I enjoyed that, what you did. And I've had it before where I've been on stage, I've done my set, got to like halftime where we're having a drink in the bar. Some guys walked up to me and said, you know what? I've seen you 3 times. Said every time I see your face, I think I haven't seen this guy. And then you get to a particular joke, and that's it. I'm in. And you're like, that's nice to hear, kind of thing. You want to be that little bit more memorable sometimes. They go, that guy's going to do a joke about something.
Yeah.
I've heard it before, and it's great. And I don't mind hearing it again, you know.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's for me, what I would say, what I noticed for myself, again, the competitiveness of, oh, this person's won the night. Let me go and I've got to outdo them. I've got to outdo them. I think, again, bringing it to film, one of the things what's kind of changed for me is it's at least a perceived confidence in your material or yourself going on stage. And that, like you said, I'll go and oh, this person's amazing. I've got to try and tie up with what they've done. Watching film, they interviewed the guy. I forgot his name. He does the voiceover for Optimus Prime from Transformers.
Okay.
And he was saying, at first when he got that role, he was going to go, "Hi, I'm Optimus Prime," and do like a big show and dance. He based it off one of his friend's brothers, who was like an ex-military guy, who's really, really tough guy. But when he'd be in a room, he'd just be like, and really calm. And that's why Optimus Prime's voice became quite mellow, because it's sometimes having the confidence in the material. And I think it's, again, that consistency thing of, when you see people, when you do jokes like that, like you mentioned, it's to me such a good thing of, I'm sometimes aware of it, or I try and be vigilant when you see people who might just be very relaxed or mundane, but once they go on that stage, that's the killer. And I think that's the thing to lean into. And in particular, where it is, if you're not, some people are really like overly energetic, you can't compete with. But if you go on and you're just yourself and relaxed and bring them to your pace, I struggled with it at first. I tend to find now, if I'm on stage, if I slow down and try and relax, people have more confidence in you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I tried, this is full disclosure here, I tried something for the very first time last night in comedy I'd never done before. I wouldn't say I suffered from anxiety, but somebody, a fellow comic, kind of made a point saying, you look like sometimes when you're standing up and you're talking, you look scripted and you don't look completely relaxed. You look like you're trying to force it out. So when we were doing a rehearsal group, and I did my set and I sat down, and he just looked at me and went, do that.
Yeah.
Just do that.
Yeah.
So last night I did it for the very first time. I got on stage, Comedy Incorporated. I grabbed the chair from the back of the room and just put it on the stage and sat there, literally sat there and just spoke to people. And everybody I've sent that picture to has gone, you just look a lot more relaxed and in it. And I'm just like, yeah, but my posture is absolutely diabolical. Slumped. I need to work on that. But the whole persona that I felt I gave off, and I could come in and out of the set and play on it, but I still fluffed so many bits of the set. But I've now got to a point where I acknowledge that I've messed up. And
no, but I agree with that. I think I've noticed myself, first of all, again, it would almost be a cheat where I can go in and be high energy, but sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we've got them for the crowd, but it's the real skill is being able to be relaxed on stage. I respect every sort of art, if you like, but I find, for this reason, I think it is biased, but I think stand-up is the hardest of all the arts, purely because when it comes to music, if you see an amazing musician and they're doing really well, the audience can just stand there in amazement. Same for acting, if you watch live drama. With comedy, you only know you're doing well when the audience is reacting or participating. As a comedian, that's the only acknowledgement you get. So yeah, I definitely encourage that as well. If you have that luxury. We did one the other no, it wasn't the other night. It was a couple of months ago. I did one with Tevin and a couple other comedians, and I went on first, and I was standing on the stage, and we were so far from the audience that completely there was just no connection, and I completely bombed,
Yeah.
and it just felt no connection. Tevin said then, he's like, I'm going to sit down on the stage, and just sat down there, came down to the level, and you just
Yeah.
saw the audience a lot more relaxed. And it was like, yeah, it showed me from there, get in the room, get relaxed. And the thing of, again, as I mentioned earlier, fluffing your lines or panicking and or messing up a line, especially when you're trying something in a different way for the first time.
Yeah.
My big tip I'd want people to take away with this is, I always say now, whenever I go on, I'm always thinking about the next gig. So I don't care now if I stumble a line. If I find something where I haven't done it well, I will pick myself apart on it. But I just think, okay, try and do better next time. Try and do it better next time.
Yeah.
Rather than panicking so much on the gig I'm doing now.
Yeah, like last night when I did the sitting down for the very first time, I went into that gig. My aim was, how does it feel sitting down? It wasn't remembering your set.
Yeah.
I fluffed enough parts of the set to know it wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
But knowing how it feels in myself, just to be sat down. And like I say, I've sent it a few pictures to a few people, and they said, change your body position slightly in the way you have one foot on the floor, not sitting completely on the stool, because then it looks like you're then pushing forward, and you want them rather than sitting backwards in a chair. And it's all those little things that you never ever think about. That's an impression you kind of give off to people. And I'm only just starting to learn it. And it's really weird because I'm still so early in this journey in the number of gigs I've done and stuff like that, but you're always learning. I can never imagine I get to a point where I don't stop learning something new from every single gig I do. Whether it's good or bad, I will learn something.
Yeah, that's a great attitude to have. I think is if you think, right, I've mastered it, you're gonna stand behind, and that's what's happened with me. To this day, I don't think I mean, I've had good gigs, but I always say to myself, I don't think I've had like 3 amazing gigs in a row ever. I mean, it's whenever you, either way, and it works both ways. Sometimes you're disheartened and you're thinking, oh, what's the point? Or what am I going to do? I remember, this wasn't for me, but for the guy Dimitar at the time when we was gigging, we went to Hertfordshire to do a gig, and he was just like, before we got there, he was like, I don't know what to do. We were going to the Blackout. He couldn't connect to an audience. He was getting gonged off at shows. It wasn't going well. And then they were like, we'll come out to some music. And the guy decided for him to play the Bulgarian national anthem. And then he just started singing the Bulgarian national anthem with so much passion, like in this pub in Hertfordshire. And then went into his set, and he just destroyed the room. And then it just went on from there. And the reverse as well is, sometimes you leave a stage, and the reason why I say I always think about the next gig is you think, oh, I can do this, or I've mastered this. And then you go to the next stage and bomb, for example. So it is one of those things where I say, just always think about the next one.
So what do you see as your ambitions then for the future in comedy?
For me, I think that's one thing that changed a lot on this journey. At first, it was to do the live at the Apollos and try and get on TV and stuff like that. But quite early on, I kind of realised I just want to stay true to the craft and bring comedy. I think the job of us now it's not so much of, where are we going with comedy? I think it is trying to bring comedy back to where it was in terms of, as a whole, getting comedy to the mainstream. And part of that was watching an interview with Paul Smith where they were saying to him, why haven't you done live at the Apollo? Like, that's the gold standard, what everyone wants to get to. And he said in that interview, my cleanest jokes wouldn't be good enough for TV, or wouldn't make it to TV.
Yeah.
And he's not going to, you couldn't imagine him doing a safe show on primetime BBC, if that makes sense. But I think that's where comedy needs to go to. Is I'm now, me and Tevin are actually doing some stuff together where we're going to start putting shows on again, probably monthly to start off with. But to me, getting it back to where comedy is and where it is a thing where people can tell jokes and make fun out of themselves. And I think that's more reflective, in particular, of London. It's a bit weird to me that London is such a diverse city. When it comes to comedy, it's very safe and timid, if you like. And again, it's not even just offence, but what makes this place so great is that everyone can go about their business. And the truth is, day to day, I like to think we don't care. One of the reasons I love London in that sense is, you go on the tube, there could probably be someone stark naked next to you, and 90% of the people wouldn't even notice. They just don't care. We keep yourself to yourself, and that's what it is. And so for me, for the comedy, it's a thing of almost bringing it back to where it was. So I want to do shows, obviously tour and stuff like that. But I just I feel since I started the journey, what I realised is it's not a competition. Coming in, it was to me, okay, I've got to try and compete with everyone to get that spot on TV or whatever it is. But in
Yeah.
particular, doing the open mic circuit in London, I'm sure you'll see from the guests you've had is my thing I say now is I'm like, for those pro comics, you should be afraid and be very afraid because there's a tidal wave of talent coming now from all walks of
Yeah.
life where I just feel I've seen it within the year that I've been in here where I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are, it's just, they just need a spotlight. That's all they need. Some of the
Yeah.
comics you see and just the standard in general, in particular, since I've started, I don't know if it's just where I've been or just the level it is. You see, to me now, I think it's interesting because being open mic, households might not know it, but I feel like something big is about to come and just take over with the amount of talent that is coming through now. I think it's in a sense going full circle back to what comedy was, and it's watch out is what I'd say.
There's certainly quite a few. I guess you'd call them semi-pro rather than pro people that are now starting to release like specials and stuff like that on YouTube, and hour-long shows. And you kind of see the internet has made it so easy for people to get their content out there. It just needs to gain that little bit of traction. Like you said with Cole, he's been doing that routine for ages, but it got something happened that one night when it went online. Something then triggered, and then bang.
Yeah.
But you don't know when that bang's going to happen.
No.
So you could be at this for years and years. Because there's a comedian that's making waves at the moment. He's now got onto TV, Ishan Akbar. Yeah. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. And then I look back at just doing some research on various things. He was doing We Are Funny Project back in 2012.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's weird to me. He's been on the same bill as I have been, but years later, kind of thing. You're thinking he started there, and okay, he's now. It probably took him like 4 or 5 years, whatever, to get to a level where he can make a living off it. But now he makes more than a living off of it, and you see that progression and realize it can't happen overnight unless you're extremely fortunate.
And even then, I think that's where you see, like now, when you see not just memes, but overnight success, when people do get it, often they'll just drift off because there's nothing there if they haven't had that experience in the background. And an example of that, like you say as well, is Mo Gilligan. I don't know him personally, but I remember once when the supermarkets near where I am, the Old Kent Road, the Asda used to be 24 hours. And I remember once I was with my friend who knows him, and he bumped into him. This was probably 2011, 2012, about 1 o'clock in the morning. Oh, how's it going? Yeah, I'm all right. I'm just coming back from a gig. No money, nothing like that. He blew up during lockdown from one of his memes about get a couple of cans. But because he's a stand-up comedian first, that's where he made a couple of cans tour, and then Channel 4 paid attention to him, and then now he's presenting primetime TV. But that's one thing that I didn't appreciate coming in is I thought it was overnight success, and I thought that's what I wanted. I saw an interview with one of my favorite rappers, Nas, and he said exactly that. And he said this years ago. He said, everyone now wants an overnight success, but in that you miss out on the journey, and it's the journey who makes you who you are. And then if you've got any interviews or if there's books of any of your favorite comics who you see, Mark, you'll see what I noticed is when I'd go back, all of those comedians that I admired, they'd have horror stories of gigs they've had.
Oh yes,
and it's that makes you what you are. I've had it where there's 2 people in the room. I've had some gigs in just complete silence, or a gig where there's a funeral going on in the room next door. But I genuinely look forward to them because it's about getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. And I think it was Kevin Hart who said it. He had a gig where he was emceeing at a bowling alley, and every time he'd make a joke and he does his punchline, someone would hit a strike and just he'd get drowned out by the cheer. He was at MC in a strip club once, and then he's like, think about it, like, people have gone to a strip club. What are you doing there telling jokes? Like, it makes no sense. Yeah. But all those sorts of things I saw, or when I've gone to gigs, sometimes one of those was the American style to get on, signed up, and I waited. 28 comedians I watched through do their material, and then the guy had just forgotten to put me on, and so there was no space. Like, I literally just sat there for 7. I think I got there till 11, and I was there for 4 hours watching people do routines I've seen before, not tell a joke. I at the time I was fuming, but I realized afterwards and looking back, I like those sorts of moments reflectively, because that's when you know you're serious here. Because it's with open mic, I don't know about anyone else, but my thought process of, oh, someone's got a McLaren, this should be a way to make money. I've definitely not made money doing comics. Like, why do you do it? But I just know that it's the consistency and that thing of not being comfortable. That is the ingredient, or that's the secret to success. Is, as I said earlier, all of my stuff in life, I've kind of winged it or managed to make a shortcut through, or figure out a way, or blag my way through. But with comedy, stand-up comedy, you cannot blag this. You can't. There's no shortcut to success. You have to put in the hours, as they say.
You have to be prepared to. There's quite a famous, I guess it's an internet meme of a guy. It's a cartoon of a guy digging with a pickaxe going through, and he gets to the point where he then gives up. But then behind the next one is the diamonds.
Mark, that image, that image is literally sums up comedy for me. That is the exact image I tell people. I've seen that meme you're talking about, and that sums it up for me. It's like that. And I think of that, like, for example, as you mentioned, what if that night Carl decided, do you know what, I can't, it's so arse, I can't be bothered to go down to London on the train to go and do a gig. He's touring now. He's got residencies in venues from that. His life changed from that moment. For example, I don't know if you've ever done the Blackout and had there's a guy, Bemi Oladipo, Gaptooth Nigerian's his name.
No, he's not been there.
He's a great comic, but I was speaking to him about Top Secret, because that's probably the one that I want to do. The one room that I want to do is the Top Secret room, because I've been there in the audience, and it's one of the few places I find in London where, dare I say, you can say anything. And the standard of comedy there, whether it's your type of comedy or not, you just see there's a certain level that people are at in that room. And as an audience member, you're looking around, when you're a comedian in the audience, like, oh, I'm so jealous of this. I want this here. Yeah. But he told me how he got his big break was he'd applied. They said, they say something like, send us 10 minutes from the Comedy Store or Backyard. Where am I getting that from? And then they'll go from there. But how he actually got on is he was just going to watch comedy, and the guy who runs it was running around the place looking flustered because one of the comedians hadn't turned up. And one of the ladies he knows who does comedy, she just said, what about him? Get him on. He's good. And then from then, that's how he's secure. Then he's there pretty much every other week now. And that's the thing of, like you're saying, just be prepared, and you never know. And that's the way I think it has to be in this game.
Yeah, it's so true. You know, that big break may never happen, but if you give up, that big break will never happen.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well. Is as I've got older, is the regret is you get to a stage when I get older, anyway, for myself, where I'm like, I've always wanted to do. I said I wanted to do this at 20. I never gave it a go, and particularly for me, when I got to my 30s, I was looking back on all the things I didn't do and should have done, and now it's just like, if not now, when? And the beauty of comedy is it is something where you have your perception can count. Like there's some comedians now who are even new to the circuit, but they're older. But do you know Ian Yaxley? I don't know if you know him.
No.
He's an old gentleman, but new to comedy. And to me, I don't know if it's anyone else. The older people are starting comedy, the more respect I have for them, because it's like, this is a longevity game and coming into it.
Yeah.
But his whole thing, for example, he flips it on its head, where he's like, oh, you people have got ADHD and all these things that all the young people have. I don't have none of that. Or you show off that, you've got youth on your side. I've got a house. Like I bought my house for 30 grand in the 90s or whatever it was. And it's just like, he completely flips it. And I think that's the beauty of this, is no matter where you are in life, no matter who you are, it's never too late to try. It's never too late, or to tell your opinion. It's always valid.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah. So here's a little fun one for you then. So things do go well for you, and you do end up with a live at the Apollo set, and the producer says to you, "So what's your walk-on music? What are you going to walk onto the stage to? What do you pick?"
Yeah, early on I did a radio show with my friend Dima, and they were saying, pick your best songs, your most memorable songs. One of mine was Bob Marley, Could You Be Loved? Because I remember being a kid, my dad, I remember him beating me to that song, Could You Be Loved? Like, so full circle moment. It's probably one of those songs where I feel like, I think we just laughed at the time, that I just think, that'd be a nice one to walk onto. Or the big or is for me, and I've got a joke on it, and depending again if it's a British crowd, Mr. Brightside by the Killers. Don't know if you know. Yeah. That song there is to me the unofficial British national anthem. When it comes on, people just go crazy and just start singing it word for word. And I tried it. It's the only time I've actually sat down and wrote. Is I had a writing session with Tevin, a couple other comedians coming up, Honey B and Nancy MacDonald two young women coming in who, again, though you look at and you say, whoa, I think they gig less than 20 times at the time, but you know something's coming there.
Yeah.
But it's the one I wrote where it was like, I can cure any couples thing. And I just start singing the song, and I got the audience to sing it at a Blackout, and they just started singing the song there. I did it at Your Friend and Mine as well. And it's just one of those things where it's like, it's just contagious. So yeah.
Yeah. It's Mr. Brightside and Sex on Fire.
Yeah.
Any one of them two. And
yeah.
But if anybody ever plays, what's the song called? Sweet Caroline, please go away.
No, yeah,
Can't stand that thing. I can't stand it.
But that's one of those things that I think people say that. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, not this again. But if you're out and it comes on, you won't?
I walk out. And the worst thing is anybody who ever does the but burrs, that's not in the song. That is not in the song.
Yeah.
Go away, leave it alone. It doesn't need to be sung. It's terrible.
So, but one of the things I love is things that frustrate comedians. Like, now, if we're ever at a gig, you will see me go, just like, it's like, what's his name? Tevin. He really, I don't know if you spoke, when he spoke to you, told you he really hates prop comedy because he's right and he's very intricate. And for me, sometimes when it's a night, even if every comedian's been great, when it's joke after joke, that's not joke after joke like that, but written work and really well structured, sometimes you just enjoy that break from when it is just something so silly and so ridiculous. I do anyway. Yep. And watching him in almost disgust and uncomfortable, I love it. I love nothing more than watching that there, but because I understand the frustration, but it's one of those things that's always got me, I think.
It's a weird one, isn't it? I think I love prop comedy. I'd love to be able to do proper like one-liner Mark Rivlin puns as well. I can't. They just don't suit me. I love watching that probably more than people doing similar stuff to me. Like watching Jack Scullion last night headlined or closed Comedy Incorporated. And if you've never seen his act, I don't know how to describe it, but it's pure unadulterated entertainment.
You can't,
And it's when you get acts as well that are self-deprecating on stage and something goes wrong and they make a point of it's gone wrong and stuff. You're laughing with them. The whole point is to be entertaining. And if you can be entertaining in whichever way, that works.
That's the thing for me. I think about it, and that's what is going back to the audience. The perspective of the audience is sometimes as comedians, I think we get so caught in the structure and all the technicals of joke writing and stuff like that. And then it's like with Jack, I really found it funny. It was only recently I noticed that, and he said it, where he's throwing the beer mats on the floor as he's telling the jokes, and then he's like, "There's nothing on these." It's just so simple and silly, but it's just so. It's such a relief, and that's why I love his nights, and that actually helped me when I did. It was the first time I'd originally done. Have you done TNT?
Yes.
Yeah, I did TNT with Sama, and she's been doing that for years. I didn't realize how long it'd been going, and that's where I met Jack Scullion, and then he messaged me on Facebook and said, I've got a night on in Deptford, South London, not knowing I was from South London. Do you want to come down? That was the first Your Friend and Mine that I went to, which I think he told you the chaos of, there was a drunk guy coming in and me and my friends and the audience were like escorting him out in the middle of the show. But he was just so in the show. And I think as well, particularly with Jack, he's such a nice guy that he says, like, unlike some nights, with the bringer, stayer sort of thing, it's like you can just rock up and introduce yourself. You don't necessarily have to send a video and send a note, stuff. And I just think where he's so personable, it just makes such a great experience. And part of the reason why, I'm sure you've heard about him and the Not Another Quiz Night and all the success that's getting and the traction it's gained. And you're just like, it doesn't deserve to happen to anyone nicer. He's just such a big, lovely guy.
He is. And his act is just on a different planet, but it's so entertaining. I love it. But yeah, like I love the beer mats. I always wondered though, when he comes up and says, "Oh, yeah, there's nothing on these." Yeah. If he's only holding one up that has nothing on it, but the rest of them do, that's the trick.
Show business, you know.
You just don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it's so cool. Talking of strange jokes and stuff, I'm going to set you the comedian's challenge if you're up for it.
Oh, okay.
So for those that don't know and listening for the first time, the Comedian's Challenge is I like to set a comedian to tell a joke from this book called The Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch. The comedian gets to pick the joke they tell, but they only get to pick it by page number. So what they get out of this is probably going to be utter dire crap.
Okay.
But it's interesting to see how a comedian will maybe integrate this into a set for a one-off, or will just say, I'm going to tell this joke, or do something strange with it. I just don't know. We'll see what happens with Paul.
Yeah.
So if you want to give me a number between 5 and 95.
5 and 95. Oh, I'll go 89 then. 89. See, I was born.
89. It's already gone.
Oh, okay. Another number?
Next one. Yeah, give me another number.
I'll say 7. I mentioned, don't tell me that's gone. Lucky number 7.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Joke 1 or joke 2?
Joke 1.
Okay. What's your favourite thing about Switzerland? Well, the flag is a big plus.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'll get that in there. I'll definitely get that in there.
Yeah, so when you do it, film it and tag us in it, and we'll share it across the socials and stuff. And yeah, you can have a look at, if you look on our the pinned part of our Instagram feed, you'll see a few of the other comics goes at that. Chris Alley's done it, Matt Lowe's has done it, Kim Hope's done it. I can't remember who else has done it now, but there's quite a few on there now, and some of them are. I'll always draw people's attention, and it has to go to Matt Lowe's one. Just watch it. He does it he does the joke at the start, and then he does a callback to it. And it's just the way he's integrated it into a set. It's just beautiful. And I'm just like, it's such a shit joke, but you've done it so well. So much props to Matt. I know he listens to these every time. So Matt, thank you so much for that one.
Yeah, I love shit jokes. Do you know what? I think I might go tonight. I don't know if I'll be able to, but I was going to go and watch another show, but what I'll do is I'll make sure, as I've mentioned it, and I encourage comedians to do it. I'll do it at the Blackout the next time I'm at the Blackout, definitely. 100%. And not in the 2 minutes. If I get through that, then I'll make sure I get it in. Or either open with it and then call back to it. Wherever you want it, let me know. Definitely.
Do it however you want it to work. It's your set. It's your bit of fun. But no, it's quite interesting how people can get these kind of crap jokes into their sets and stuff. So where can people find you then on the socials? And I'll put links in all the description and everything.
Socials now is at Paul Certi, mainly on Instagram, TikTok, all social platforms. It's the same. It's my name. As I said, I've got some stuff in the pipeline, and November 16th, fingers crossed, hopefully, I've got a big show in Peckham Levels, South London. So I'm bringing it home. It's 200 people plus. By the time this comes out, hopefully it will all be up and running and there. And on that, I'm emceeing the night, and I got some of those, as you mentioned, semi-pro stroke pro comics. Yeah, just to as I say, for me, it's to bring comedy back to where it is, because a lot of people, as I say, just don't realize. You don't realize sometimes as comedians, not to take away from us, but as invested as we are, people don't know what's going. A lot of people don't. That's why this platform's important. It's to bring that awareness. So mark the date, Saturday, November the 16th.
But no, thank you very much today for your time today. It's been absolutely wonderful. For everybody listening, you can find us on Open Mic Comedy Pod on Instagram. We've got a website, openmiccomedypod.com. Whichever platform you're listening to this on, please give it a review, follow, subscribe, whatever it is you do these days on the various different ones. It helps raise the profile of us and gets these lovely people that I'm speaking to on a weekly basis heard a bit more. And you never know, you may be listening to the next big success. So, give us a help with that. So thank you very much for your time today, Paul.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
And until next time, I'll speak to you all very, very soon.